All right, so we can go and get started. Welcome to the Leadership Development Workshop. So we have 4 great leaders here today to help share some advice and their expertise on managing teams while also working in their own realms as well. So just to get started, if you all could go down the line and just introduce yourself, maybe tell us about your role a little more in depth, and then yeah, just let us know like what company you work for as well. Sure.
So my name is Leo DiNapoli. I'm the head of U.S. Regulatory Affairs here at UCB. I've been with UCB for 12 years. I've been a CRO for a number of years before that, and then an academic research scientist before that. I oversee the regulatory strategy group here in the U.S. We're responsible for the development and maintenance of all the products that we have in the U.S. Also responsible for all labeling, and we work in promotion too, among other things.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Kura Kadia. Also at UCB. I've been here for about 18 years now. I feel like a dinosaur every time I say that. I started my career in hospital, working as staff pharmacist, but then also some clinical roles in cardiology and oncology, but then have been in industry since then. Started in medical affairs, but then moved probably about 14, 15 years ago into safety, and it's my current role, lots of different roles in safety. And my current role, I head up our international pharmacovigilance operations teams, making sure that we have affiliates all across the world and that we're doing things in a consistent and harmonized and efficient manner. I also head up the local teams in the US as well as the rest of the Americas region. So everywhere from Canada down to Argentina and Brazil report to me. And then third hat I wear, we have in Europe a EU QPPV role, qualified person for pharmacovigilance role, and I'm not the QPPV, but I help manage the operational piece of that office as well. So a few different hats. Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. I'm Sarah Nicely. I am the SVP of Outcomes and Impact at Clinical Education Alliance. It's a company with several sister companies within it. So the parent company houses the commercial side, which is not the side that I work on. They do all sorts of strategy and marketing and all sorts of things. I work on the CPD side, so I work on the continuing professional development side. We have 3 different CE brands, CCO, ProCE, and PCE. My team, I lead 2 different teams, the outcomes team, which is responsible for managing all of the results from any of our continuing education. And I also manage the accreditation team, which is responsible, of course, for adhering to our accreditation standards. And then I lead the fellows. I've only been in the space for about 3 years. I come from a background in academia and clinical pharmacy. So I have around 20 years of practicing with an internal medicine team. I'm not ashamed to say that COVID broke me, and then I started looking for something different. And I have, in addition to my PharmD, I have a master's in education with a focus in measurement, assessment, statistics, evaluation. So that's actually from UIC. So.
Awesome. Yeah, so my name is Richard. I currently work with Becky Dickinson in the Urology and Critical Care Department. I am part of our global marketing team. So primarily my responsibilities span from everything from new product innovation all the way up through post-launch excellence. Heavy focus primarily on kind of the new product development side and innovation, but currently we are going through a little bit of a transitional phase, so I kind of have my hand a little bit of everything on the commercial side, from the business development and some of the new product areas where we're researching into new kind of fields and landscapes that we might play in the future. But yeah, I started off with BD coming out of pharmacy school as a fellow, and then as I worked through there, I stayed with the team after I completed my fellowship and decided that marketing was for me, so that's where I've been ever since.
Okay, moving on. Can you guys all describe how you?
I just wanted to also add, because I should have added this in the introduction, I introduced you before, that they are both like really in support of the fellowship program. So to add that, as we have other fellowship directors on the panel, Leo, he of course has been very supportive over all the years since the regulatory fellowship started. I know that from talking to past fellows, And he even has monthly one-on-ones with us. We definitely appreciate that exposure, that visibility to leadership. And then Encore, even though we're in different departments, I still met with him because I heard others speaking so greatly about your support of the fellowship program over the years as well. And I know from Collins, as he is the patient safety fellow, that he does work with you a bit on Encore, and he said the same thing that he meets Encore and that they have a really great relationship too. So I just want to shed some light on the support of the fellowship program here to be used. So thanks.
Cool.
So obviously, on top of being leaders within your departments, you have day-to-day responsibilities as well. Can you guys describe how you sort of balance managing other people while also managing your own tasks? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. It's a real challenge, quite frankly. I oversee a portfolio of 25 plus products that includes marketed to those in development, and trying to stay at the right level without micromanaging and staying down to the details, but also not being an absent leader. So it's how you find that appropriate balance. And I cannot stress enough the importance of work-life balance there. And I'm not going to say that I practice what I preach necessarily, but it's really critical, because if you burn yourself out trying to do everything at once, you're not going to get as much out of any one specific thing as you would if you actually focus. Now, you can do a variety of things, and it's not, I don't think we focus on one thing, but I think as a leader, you really do have to take a step back and trust the people on your team that they can carry the ball, and you're really there to help them.
Yeah, and I'll chime in next. I think for me specifically, my role is global in nature, so I work with people in Japan, other parts of Asia, Europe, as well as the Americas region, and that adds another layer of complexity in terms of time management. And I think I'll go to what Leo was saying too. Part of the thing is really spending time in developing the relationships with your team members and developing those relationships to a point where then you can feel comfortable delegating and really trusting is the only way to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a work-life balance and you'd be working all the time. So really the soft skills, the communication skills, this is, some of the stuff that we probably didn't learn, at least when I was in pharmacy school and spent too much time on. I don't know if that's changed. You guys are better at that, but I think that was one of the things that coming out of pharmacy school, I realized that is equally as important as the clinical teachings that you get as well, to be able to navigate these more matrixed organizations, which UCB and many other companies are. You have so many stakeholders, and I think as we continue forward, that's only going to increase because the communications are getting easier and it's going to be more and more matrix. So really being able to spend time in developing those, putting the time up front and developing the relationships and the trust allows you to then delegate and then being able to do your own work. Otherwise, you're just busy managing people and not able to accomplish what you need to accomplish.
I don't have a ton to add. I think that these are all really great points. And one of the things that I struggled with when I transitioned into my role is I come from an acute care, like big hospital system, internal medicine patients, tons of responsibilities. And I think I took that same energy and applied it to this job. And at the hospital, I always had somebody that I could transition the patient to. So, you're done with your work day, you've got somebody that you can hand off to, that patient's going to be safe and take care of it. In this role, there's not somebody that I can transition things to, but also I don't have a patient that's actively trying to do something detrimental. So recognizing that I need to take care of myself and I need to give my best while I'm at work, I think has been a mind shift for me. And making sure that I do balance those responsibilities and balance the well-being that I need to have in my own life so that I can show up with the best version of myself. Because at the end of the day, the education that we're delivering gets to a patient in some capacity. So it needs to be accurate, it needs to be appropriate, and I need to show up in that way.
Yeah, I think everybody pretty much covered all the.
Although we'll start with you next time. That would be a good start, right?
But, yeah, I would just say another key component, at least for me, has always just been demonstrating what good organization looks like, right? Like what is what is the expectation there, and like setting up a strong communication cadence where you really designate that time, right? Because it's easy sometimes to shift things as responsibilities and priorities start to move around in the calendars and everybody's kind of shuffling to get things done, really, honestly. Like, you're trying to meet deadlines, everybody's busy, but you have to carve out that time and make sure that you're settling in and kind of giving people the advice and working through the problems that they're having, as you promised, essentially, right? So that's the only thing I could add.
Awesome. I think you all gave really great examples of how you balance leadership with your day-to-day. Can you go into some individual skills you think that have made you a successful leader within your specific area?
All right. Yeah, so I think, again, kind of going back to that first bit about being organized, that's something that is not necessarily like a skill, it's something that you build on, right? That's something that you continually work towards. I think that you have a lot of different ways in which you can accomplish a goal, but honestly, if you find something that works really well for your process and everybody else around you is satisfied with like the level of timing and the way that you complete your tasks and things like that, then you typically want to continue to progress that, right? You can't just kind of rest on the fact that everybody here is kind of smiling today because tomorrow new issues arise and it's never going to be the same set of challenges. So, just kind of working around that preparation bit and the organizational skills, I think, is kind of one key component that I've found has made it a little easier.
So I think the biggest thing that I've discovered about my leadership style is how I show up with humanity. And sometimes that cannot be well received. But I do think, and Akashi mentioned this yesterday, about the 6 generations of workers in the workforce right now, right? And sometimes you need to show up in different ways for different generations and for different individuals. And I think one of the things that I bring to the table with my particular leadership skill is to show up and recognize you as an individual, you as a human, and the things that you've got going on in your life. It does not mean that the work doesn't need to get done, right? But are there opportunities for us to ebb and flow, or for me to take on a little bit, or for me to shift this responsibility, or what isn't mission critical right now that we could offset? And I think that particular skill set and the ability to connect and to read people and to show up in a humanistic way has resonated with the teams that I lead.
So this is great. This is very similar to what I was going to say is empathy and really understanding it's not just, you're trying to achieve a goal, it's you're trying to do it together with the team and how do we do it together. So you covered that really well. So I'm going to actually pivot and give another skill, which I think really helped me, especially early on in my career, is around decision making. And as scientists and learning, typically want to know almost everything before we kind of make a decision. And what I found, great leaders and helping me become a better leader is almost applying sort of a 70-30 or 80-20 rule where, yes, you know enough to make a decision. You may not know everything, but you can pose yourself. If that could be in terms of going for a new job or a new career, or it could be, making a decision on which direction we want to go with the project you're working on or whatever it is, but really kind of getting comfortable in making decisions where you don't have 100% knowledge, you don't have 100% certainty, and being able to lead in that vagueness of a decision, because I think that's what people look for. A lot of people want somebody that is comfortable and saying, yes, this is the direction we want to go, even though it's not really 100% clear, and people follow when they see a leader being able to point a direction and say, this is the right way we want to go, people end up following you. So that's another aspect of the leadership that I really had to learn and get comfortable with.
I'm not sure what else to add. I'll underscore the 80-20 on decision making. I think it's important to be sort of self-reflective and know your own quirks and failures. I know I fail a lot because one of my natural tendencies is like, there's a bunch of problems in my inbox. I try to fix them all and then okay, I'm done for the day, right? That just creates chaos. So I think my father was in the military and he always taught me, make sure you understand something before you try to change it. Really do the homework, and you can't know every single thing, right? So, as a leader, find your comfort level, and 80-20 is, I think, a good benchmark. make sure you really understand, do the work to understand the problem and what's underneath. Otherwise, you're just going to create chaos at all levels.
Do any of y'all have any moments in your career that you feel like were really pivotal for you developing as a leader? If so, could you share those experiences or moments where you kind of had like a aha moment about like wanting to be a leader or taking on a new leadership position?
Start.
Start in the middle.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. If I look back, there's probably two things that were instrumental in kind of my journey. One was when I was really in the hospital setting and knowing that I really didn't want to. I wanted something different from a long-term career perspective. I was 2-3 years out of pharmacy school. Really had wanted to target industry. Very difficult to get into industry. I didn't have the experience in the industry. I found a small consulting company almost that really was a startup and was supporting medical affairs, outsourcing. So really outsourcing for like medical information departments, medical science liaisons, and it was a big risk, I guess. So first was sort of risk taking, I guess. I was living in the Northeast in Connecticut. I had to move down here to Atlanta and really just saying, okay, is this a risk worth taking, or is this something I really want? And getting comfortable in taking risks and making changes really kind of helped me, because that really put me on a trajectory, exposed me to industry best practices, allowed me to get into industry in the long run and working for a pharmaceutical company, which is what I wanted. So that would be one, is risk taking, and especially early on in your career, I think, I would say don't hesitate in challenging yourself to do things outside of your comfort zone if it, entails even things like you moving or trying something that you're not sure how it's going to work out. I think is really been helpful for me to get comfortable with changing. And since that, my career I've almost every 3-4 years, I've gotten a different role, and just being comfortable in changing roles, even though I don't know exactly what that role is going to entail, has helped me kind of grow and learn more and more things, which helps you become a more well-rounded leader.
I think one of my pivotal moments was recognizing that my mentors are just that, they're mentors, and they give great advice, and it's advice based on lived experience, but it does not mean that it's the gospel truth, that there is a lens that they are living their life through, and it's important for me to see that and to recognize and to take that advice, but at the same time that my lived experience can also inform how I choose to lead. I distinctly remember a mentor telling me that people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And so I took that to heart, because I felt like for me, that had been my lived experience. I had left not necessarily the job, but I had left the boss, and I didn't like how the leadership team was managing the particular space I was in. But then that means when I transitioned to being a leader, every time somebody left my team, it was like, well, what am I doing wrong, right? What did I do wrong? And there is a moment where you should reflect and you should think through things, but you also, people have different lives. They have lives that are not work, right? And so they might leave for an entirely different reason. And I think at that moment, I started to look through the advice that I had gotten from people and mentors in my life and leaders that I had looked up to, and really started to think through, what aspects of this can I take, and what does that mean for me as a leader, and how can I apply that to my life? And instead of just following what I had believed to be true, really start to evaluate the advice and the way that I wanted to lead and the way that I wanted to show up in my own way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you typically kind of have those pivotal moments, or like that moment of realization, like when you're struggling or when you fail at something. And so those are typically the times in your life when you have to sit back and reflect on something, or you have to take a different approach, lean on some advice from people that maybe you don't normally reach out to. But I think for me personally, part of it comes in terms of similar to what both previous comments were, which is you're put in a position where you need to take a risk, right? So I had leaders above me that had left the team or exited, and you have to know the position 2 rolls up and 2 rolls down type of thing. And it's one of those situations where like you're putting yourself in a risky position by exposing, maybe your lack of skills, or you might be doing something that you don't feel particularly comfortable with. But those are also the moments that are great opportunities for you to potentially shine and also to gain that exposure that kind of helps you grow and be confident in your role, and understand that even though somebody else is going to come back in and fill that role at some point, like you were the one that helped the team kind of keep driving forward. And so those are those kind of minor risks that you need to be willing to jump into, but also just keeping in mind that like you have to have some humility and know when to ask for help and who to ask. So
I can think of one specific moment, and I'll just say that, sometimes you're not looking for leadership, but it finds you. And I had a moment where I was a teaching instructor at the Duke Marine Lab for a summer program for high school students. And the instructor made a decision that endangered some students' lives. And I had a moment where I was like, oh, I'm the responsible adult here. I need to make some decisions. And I think back to that moment and my reaction and things that I could have done better. So it was self-reflection, right? And I didn't choose to take a risk there. The risk was around me. But anytime I've been put in a new position or moved up in an organization, I've had those like, oh no, I'm now responsible for blank. And then you really got to sit and think about, okay, what have I done in the past that worked? What didn't? And how can I parlay that into success now?
I hate to leave this. A couple of us have to step out to a concurrent session over here, but if I could ask a question. Everybody in here pretty much is an individual contributor. And I remember myself when I transitioned from that to first managing people. And maybe you could share some insights to the group who hopefully all someday will be in that position of leading people. What were some of the challenges that you encountered as you made that transition from individual contributor to manager? And thanks again for all your time today.
Oh, it's my turn to start first. Got it. Okay. So I will say this in a super vulnerable space. Prior to my current position, all of the teams that I led were in a finite period of time. So I had residents that I was responsible for, but they had a 2-year commitment, right? You want them to graduate, you want them to move on. I had interns that I was responsible for, they were in a 3-year commitment. You want them to move on, you want them to graduate. In this role, I was super hesitant to step into it because I had never managed someone who was a career employee who wasn't looking to finish a program and to move on to something different, who just for whatever reason wanted to do this one role for the rest of their lives. And I thought that is terrifying. Like my entire leadership life has been to try to make everybody that I was responsible for better so that they could finish whatever and they could move on to something better. And this individuals, or all of them, they're interested in staying in their role, and that's great. And that's just a unique piece that I had a really hard time transitioning from one specific type of leader to more of a manager or a leadership role that was focused on making their jobs better in their current space. And I think that focus was challenging for me. And the approach that I took was to really look at what's driving them crazy about their current job or their current responsibility, and what can I do in that space. And the outcomes and accreditation team, they are both quintessential pieces of any education program, right? You have to have accreditation in order for it to be certified, to be fair, to be balanced education. And you have to have outcomes in order to have this report. And so nobody was listening to my teams prior to me starting. And so my entire role, instead of me trying to work towards getting these employees up and managing them out of their roles, became a how can I keep you happy in this role? How can I make it to where you're not working 60 hours a week? How can I help you have better balance in this particular role? And I think once I started to view my role as an advocate for my team, it helped me transition into like this worker person into more of a leader for this particular team.
Yeah, I think that that summarizes it really nicely in terms of just you have to be willing to be that buffer, right? For the person, you're ultimately going to be responsible for the way the schedule is run and the types of tasks that they're going to be completing. And so in a lot of ways, if you need to be willing to kind of own that aspect of it as you're reporting these things up. And so also kind of looking at it from the other direction, right? You do similar to what you said, right? It's being vulnerable to the individuals on your team, where you can open up and share that, like, hey, maybe I'm not the most well versed in some of these things, but there is a lot of things that we're going to learn together as we go through some of these things. I hope that you can continue to kind of bear with me as we move through and all this stuff, and I'll support you no matter what the outcome is, right? And so those are those kind of moments. It is a scary transition when you start to then own another person's schedule and kind of going through a lot of the nuance, right? But I think that everybody in this room probably, well, I won't even say probably, definitely has somebody you look up to, or a mentor, somebody that you lean on for advice. And so that's kind of your opportunity to sort of bridge that gap if you've lost touch with that person, or to bolster that relationship as well, where now you can go in and say, hey, I'm struggling a little bit too here, so I need to take this and learn how to be a better leader. I think that's kind of my approach to this.
For me, one of the hardest parts about that transition is, it's not about you anymore, right? It's now about the group that you're managing, and you need to think a bit broader. And one of the things I noticed was, kind of without realizing it, maybe if I bothered to stop and think about it, it would have occurred to me, but I didn't, is that your voice suddenly carries a little more weight in some conversations than you might be ready for. So I found it useful to, in any discussion with the team about like a decision, I try not to speak first, because I don't want to drive a conversation if there's already kind of a sentiment and there's things that I don't know. So I will just sort of, wait. And that's helped me a lot in that. I think you spoke to that relationship building earlier, is, make sure that everyone on your team feels heard, that their views are taken into account, and then you work together as best you can. And it's, again, it can be scary to let go of, hey, I have accountability, although I'm not down in the details. So things are happening that you literally can't see, and you just need to get comfortable with that. But having those open conversations, you'll gain that comfort too along the way.
But I think back the first time I went from an individual contributor to a team manager and having people report to me, the things I probably struggled with the most was understanding and being able to navigate that everybody likes to communicate differently. Typically it's my communication style, and that's how you communicate to everybody. But I think when you become a leader or a manager, you have to recognize that everybody has their own perspective, different things. Some people are, very ambitious and want to, advance as quick as they can. Some people like to what they do and just want to stay in that role. And some people like to really have each decision that they take verified and validated by you. And some people want you out of their hair and just want to do their own thing and come. So really being able to distinguish those team members and how to get the best out of each of those team members. Because if you apply, the same tactic across the board, you're not going to really get the best out of everyone. So that was probably one of the things the first time that I probably struggled with for a little bit, until it kind of hit me, yes, okay, I have to adapt sort of my communication style, my rapport with team members.
Are there any resources or strategies that you all have used to continue to develop your leadership skills?
I think I'm a big reader, and I like to also try to read and apply. So I don't know, it probably annoys my team, but I listened to this Adam Grant podcast a few months ago about this meeting should have been an email. I don't even know what the name of the podcast was, but it was all about like agenda setting and like showing up with the questions, sending the questions for the meeting ahead of time, and like, what do you actually need to do? And so I'm always trying different things and trying out different tactics from the stuff that I read. I'm not sure if it's the right approach. My team has a ton of patience with me as I try to figure it out. And I think each time I try something, I learn something different and I learn something new. So in my, this meeting should have been an email type adventure, it was like great, it made the meetings more efficient, but I also missed out on hearing like, what are Valerie's weekend plans? Like, oh, she's seeing her daughter this weekend, and that's important for her to share with the team. So I think it just, each time I try to discover something new or try to do something new, again, we always come back to that reflection, like what went well, what didn't go well, what can I do different next time? And then having that open curiosity and recognizing that in yourself, I think has been a strategy that's worked well for me.
I can go next. This is probably, I think somebody mentioned this, listening and asking questions more. The more I go into higher and higher leadership roles, the more and more you're not familiar with the day-to-day and the nuances. So I think to continue to be a better and better leader, one of the things that's really helped me is just listening to the experts or the people that actually know and asking questions. Really asking questions helps educate you. It also gives acknowledgement to the people that you're working with, that yes, you value their opinion as well too. So really, those are some of the things. So trying different things, yes, but then the other portion is for me really trying to listen more. And it's counterintuitive, right? As a leader, you think, yeah, you need to be the one saying everything and saying direction everything, but I think there's more value or just as much value in listening and asking questions.
Would you say there's a go-to question that you guys use for like getting the team to speak, especially working with, I don't even know how many teams y'all have all over the place and different people that you probably don't connect with on a day-to-day basis. What kind of questions do you get out there to get people to start talking and to feel comfortable enough to share with you?
I tried to ask, how did the meeting go? Did you
Yeah.
get out of it when you
Okay. Okay.
Was that effective? What could we have done better?
What am I missing? What am I not hearing, right?
Exactly. But I can't say I'm 100% on that as much as I'd like to be.
Yeah. That's probably the hardest part for me, is trying to figure out, yeah, there's something that I'm missing, because I only know 80% or 70% or 50% of what you guys are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think that creating that culture and that climate, and I know I totally derailed your question. But I think that piece is such a integral piece of being a leader and cultivating that culture to where somebody can feel comfortable enough in a room full of potentially strangers or online or across 6 different time zones or whatever to sit up and say, like, has anybody thought about, right? Has anybody missed this?
It's tougher. It's easier when it's one-on-one and face-to-face versus 20 people on a call that it's crickets if you don't. But so it always starts this way for me, and it's always something that everybody wants to talk about is what's the weather like, and we'll smile because a lot of our colleagues are in Belgium where it's always cloudy and cold and raining, so that really gets them going and it starts about it. So at least that just breaks the ice a little bit.
Okay.
Even simple things like that, right?
Yeah.
Just talk about how was your weekend if it's a Monday, right? Or something like that. Or if it's, Oscars or this or Super Bowl or whatever, just something like that. Or the default go-to is always the weather. But at least gets people starting talking. And what I find is when at least 1 or 2 people have started talking, everybody sort of feels a little bit more comfortable. So that's the word.
Yeah.
Secret strategies.
Not particularly outside of what was just shared. I mean, I think that kind of giving everybody an opportunity to speak within the meetings when you're going through something that you're leading and you're trying to get an opinion on something, it's important to not just go to the person that's working on it, but to kind of broaden it out and make sure that you're asking clarifying questions as you're coming across things, because sometimes it's, somebody else say something that the rest of the group is not as familiar with, and so it might be a little bit easier to get everybody involved if you make sure that, you have them kind of break it down for them, have everybody else understand, be on the same level, and then, you can kind of move the conversation forward.
Last question for me.
I have a comment and a question.
Okay, yeah, no, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I agree for my comment first, that I definitely agree that having that open communication in that comfortable environment is so important, especially to us fellows too, because we sit in on meetings a lot where we're expected to like listen, observe, and learn. And we're always encouraged to ask questions. And sometimes it's like it can be a little bit intimidating. You don't want to. It's maybe not the right time to speak up at the meeting, or you're afraid of asking like a dumb question, even though those don't exist. And so having that one-on-one time with our preceptors and supervisors and whoever, and getting those questions like, hey, did everything make sense? Like, do you have any questions? Were you confused about this? That really is so essential to me as we are like gaining more confidence to speak up in a meeting, or like to be vulnerable and maybe think that we're asking a question, just asking it anyway. So I think that is really important. And then I had a question about like time management skills, and was wondering if y'all could give some advice there, because coming into the second year of my fellowship, I feel like I've like stepped into more leadership roles, either like within the fellowship program or even just having more autonomy and responsibility within my fellowship tasks, like rotation tasks and whatnot. And it's like there's more people kind of like relying on you. There's just more things to do every day. There's more people to like kind of be accountable for, and that responsibility on top of like just doing the normal tasks that were already there, it just becomes a lot. So I was wondering if y'all have any advice on time management.
I can start. Yeah, so just, first of all, ask the dumb question. Always ask the dumb question. And that goes for leaders too. If you don't understand something someone is saying, you want to know the answer to the question. And it is okay to say, I don't know. It's maybe better to say, I don't know, but I can find out. But one of the things I like about regulatory, and this applies to lots of other fields too, is I'm constantly encountering new things. I had a major question for one of our flagship products this year, and I was asked like, okay, well, how will FDA react to blank? I was like, I literally have no idea. There is no precedent for this. I've never heard of this. So here's how we can kind of collapse the possibility space around it, but this is a roll of the dice, let's find out. For time management, I mean, you can say things like prioritization, but how do you actually do it? For me, there's more hours in the day, or it's not enough hours in a day to do everything that I could do. So for me, it's just focus on where you can have the most impact. Like what do you know is important? And then are there other people that can do it? Or do I need to step in and really help push something along? Or is there someone who's struggling? They need a little support so they can keep something moving. So, like you can always find things to do, but where are you actually going to have an impact? Do you need to be in that meeting, or can you get an email summary later?
I love that, asking the questions as a leader too, like, and recognizing when you don't know, because all of that shapes the culture, right? And it shapes the climate of your organization. And if you can show up as a leader and be open and honest and say, hey, actually, like, I missed that, can you repeat that? Or I didn't understand that, can you help me understand it a little bit better? Then that makes the entire meeting know that it's a safe space for them to ask questions, right? And I think the time management piece, there's so much there. On top of everything that Leo shared, there's recognizing when you are at your best. So there's a nice, there's a Daniel Pink book that's all about timing and recognizing like you and your individual brainwaves and when they think best and when they work best and when you can focus best and when you need to shift to a different task that maybe doesn't require as much brain space, and instead it's like plugging and chugging numbers on an Excel sheet or something that you could do that's a little bit less like critical thinking and more like task orientation. So finding out when you work best, and stacking yourself up for success, like putting your meetings at a time where maybe, hey, yeah, okay, I know I need to pay critical attention during this meeting and I know I need to do this, let me schedule it at this time of day. Or I also try to stack, I know I think best in the mornings. So Tuesday and Thursday mornings, my schedule is completely blocked. And from 7 to 11, I am just doing deep thinking work. And that means that Mondays, my meeting schedule is ridiculous. And it's just nonstop back to back. And that means then Tuesday morning, I can reflect on those meetings. I can think about what tasks I need to do. Utilize your calendar, utilize your time, utilize how you think best. Some people, like my partner works best and thinks best in the evening, like 11 o'clock, and his brain is working nonstop. And I'm already in my second cycle of REM. Like it is just a very different, brainwave situation, but you can't know that and you can't optimize your efficiency and your time management until you know those things about yourself. And I would just encourage you guys to discover that.
Yeah, I mean, you articulated that perfectly. I think, first off, 100% agree. You have to be willing to ask the question, even if it feels kind of silly in the moment and stuff. I mean, a big part of, I think, what you described, right, as you're transitioning into new roles and responsibilities is that you have leaders around you who trust you to do things and they assign you ownership over something. And that's not to say like this is my way of putting the blame on somebody or putting something that I don't think you can handle. It's really saying that there's a trusting environment here that you are supported, but you know, I want you to run with this. And so in thinking of those types of things as you continue to move forward, applying, I guess, organization to it, a lot of it will come down to like how do you block out time to actually complete the tasks versus, you know, talking about the tasks, right? Because we have so many meetings, so many discussions, there's all these different things that kind of convolute the schedule. And then lastly is just knowing what a real priority is. Like how do you assign priorities as you move through your day? Because one thing that starts to happen is you'll see all of these really important tasks that start to pop up and you're getting it from different stakeholders all throughout the day, right? Everybody there thinks that this is the priority, this is the most important thing on your agenda, but you're really the one that has to own what the priority is there and be able to communicate that outward and tell everybody else, you know, this is actually what needs to come off the docket first, and then we can work our way down to some of these other things, because if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority, right? It's just one of those,
I think just from a real tactical perspective, what I use, it's still very old school. I still every morning I'll get a notebook, I'll write my, you know, priorities that I want to do for the day, but then I actually prioritize those priorities too into one, which means it needs to get done today, two, probably like, you know, sometime this week, and three is a longer term thing. So I don't waste my time on those things that are longer term that don't need to get done today. So every morning, and I redo that every day. So then communicate effectively to the team on, hey, this is what we really need to get done first priority. So it's even prioritizing your priorities. As ridiculous as that sounds, but for me, tactically doing that first thing in the morning kind of gears me up so that I can stay focused, because you're right, the day starts and there's so many other new things coming your way and you can get sidetracked. So kind of having that list in front of me on my desk of these are the 3 things I have to get done today keeps me, you know, helps me manage that time.
There's those quadrants, right? What are those? There's 4 quadrants that are like, this low one is you don't have to do it and it's not a priority at all, versus this is definitely, it has to be me and it is a priority. It's like I don't know who the author is, but it's 7 Habits of Highly Effective. And they talk about I can't remember, but like it would be a good workbook, good exercise.
before quadrants.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing, and also what you're doing. It's just like you're prioritizing what you guys need to do and what needs to be done today, what can be done later this week, what can.
Right.
Yeah.
One other thought that I'd add is don't be afraid to ask for help, because, you know, there's, you know, a lot of us are overachievers and we want to do everything, but there are limits. And so if you might actually have more than you can prioritize away, and that just creates this stress drag on your life and your performance. So, you know, speak to your managers and say, hey, am I missing something, or is this too much? And they might have a totally different view of the prioritization list that you've made, and they can help nudge you and say, no, forget this stuff, just do this.
I'll open it up for anyone that has any questions.
You want me to check online too?
There was a question in the chat on what was the title of that time management book that you brought up?
Okay, Daniel Pink, and I think it's The Power of When. I will pull up my Goodreads, or maybe Lean's already on it. It's a Daniel Pink book, and we talked about it yesterday, my fellows and I, because we were talking about being outside. He also talks in this book about so it's not just about what timing of the day, but also what you're surrounding yourself by. So if you're trying to take a break and you're trying to get out of your like down cycle of thinking and get back into a creative space or get back into a focused space, just the power of even being outside. So go and just stand by a tree, look at nature. Like if you can't leave the building, look at a picture of a tree. Like find something that helps take your brain away from like all the work and instead focuses it on nature, focuses on water. And so I'm not out here.
Or regrets?
No. Something about when. I'm gonna find it for you. I looked at it last night. So I would just encourage you guys to think through, again, there's all that stuff about what a lark or an early bird and an owl, like the circadian rhythms of your day. I'll drop it in the chat.
It's when, with the scientific secrets, perfect timing.
Yeah, okay, so it's just called when, W-H-E-N, I did.
You're right
I
on.
will-
You said when, that's the one
I
word you
said
remembered,
when.
so you're right on.
Trust your gut as leaders.
That's right, trust my gut. I do 80% of the title, 100% of the title.
Anyone else have any questions?
So Carly has in the chat, a lot of us will be going from interviewee to interviewer for the first time during recruitment season. Can you guys speak a little on the strategies used to conduct a successful interview?
Start us off.
Sure. So it's tough because that's a very nuanced process, right? Like, you can't go into it with a head full of steam, knowing that this is my ideal candidate, right? Like there is a feeling out period there where you have to think about what this role is intended to achieve. For me personally, I tend to go in looking for a candidate who seems ambitious and seems like somebody who's willing to work to be trained, right? Like that's ideal for me as opposed to somebody with a perfect background or a great skill set. And a lot of times it's very tempting when you see somebody with a really colorful looking resume and it's sitting in front of you and you're going, this would be perfect. Like they're plug and play, right? Like they're gonna walk in here and absolutely be able to do anything I throw at them. But in all earnestness, like sometimes that might not be the best fit because you're gonna have maybe personality differences, or you do have somebody with a loaded background that comes in and is saying like, why am I doing something at a different level than what my expectation was maybe? And so it can be a very difficult decision to make as you're starting to narrow candidates and do all these different things. But I think one thing to keep in mind is that you have to find a way to level the playing field at some point and determine like what is really kind of the most integral parts of like what is your ideal scenario for success for these individuals, right? Because they're going to be with you for some time, and so being able to train them, able to work alongside them for long periods of time is really important.
Sure, I'll go next. Personality fit, I think, is always something that you're scanning for. Are they going to fit on the team? But in general, one thing that I do, I have a particular distaste for people who overinflate their resume, and I'm more than willing to push to make sure that someone actually did something that they said they did. Or if you look at key terms like, oh, I led this application to FDA, great. Tell me about that. What did you do? Okay. Were you just coordinating, or were you actually leading? Were you contributing? Were you strategist, or were you just copy editing? It's okay to push those boundaries because you need to know what they've actually done versus what they just said on their CV. I have one example in my mind of someone who's like, a perfect resume, like at an open position, a desperate need. I look at the resume, this is perfect. This person has 20 years of experience, and in talking with the candidate, absolutely didn't understand the strategy needed for the role, was purely operational mechanics kind of person, and more of a compiler than an actual leader. So, if you see cracks in a resume, or you sense a crack in someone, find out the details, because you want to know earlier rather than later. And I always, in addition to personality fit, I like curiosity. I want someone that's curious and interested, like willing to learn and wants to grow. So look for those.
One of the things I really try to gauge, so I agree, typically the strongest person on paper is never at the end the strongest candidate, and so there's a lot to be said for that interaction during the interview. And one of the things I try to really hone in on is understanding when they face challenges, whether they were successful or not, what did they learn? And it goes back to being reflective, because no matter how good you are, life is going to throw something that, a curveball, and you're not gonna know what to do, and you're gonna struggle, and you're gonna have to learn and adapt and grow. So really trying to tease that out in terms of how does a person handle those types of situations, and what are their experiences? Are they reflective, or are they just, well, it didn't work and I just moved on, without it really being reflective? Really gives you an indication of, okay, is this person going to be somebody that is really going to grow and blossom when they face, a difficult situation, or is it somebody that's going to really need hand-holding and you to kind of walk them through every step, and so then match that with what type of role you're actually looking for. What are you trying to look for? Are you looking for a leader, or are you looking for just, a compiler? And so trying to get to that level of nuance of understanding what you need in that role, not just now, but maybe next year and 2 years, and then asking those questions to try and tease out is that the right fit.
So I think that touches on what I would offer that's maybe a little bit different than what you gentlemen have said. Think through what you're hiring for. Like, personality doesn't matter as much if you're hiring for somebody who is fact checking and writing needs assessments and who never has to talk to another client. There's another author that I read, and her name is Lovey Alvajai Jones, and she talks about like vibes can't book you a flight, right? Like, it doesn't matter if your personality is great. It matters if you can follow my schedule and can figure out the best flight time for whatever. You don't need somebody with X, Y, or Z if the role does not require X, Y, or Z. So think about what it is that you're looking for in that role and that responsibility, and then hire for that. There are a lot of our jobs that require you to interact with human beings and require you to not be a tool, and instead require you to have like good personal communication. There are some roles that don't. So think through those things as you identify what is important to you in this role. And I think taking a step back, because it's much easier to have a positive impression of somebody that you click with. But if the role doesn't require you to click with them, and instead this particular skill set works out really well, hire for that skill set.
And just one more quick thing I wanted to add is, just based on what I've seen from today, right? Like, one thing to be very wary of as you are starting to go through these is nowadays AI is fully integrated with everything we do, right? And you're going to start to see that as resumes come across. And so start to keep in mind for, what does authentic look like? Because it's difficult to discern sometimes. But as was pointed out earlier, right? Like, sometimes you're going to have to tease out the details and understand kind of what is the actual contribution to a task that was highlighted, or what was something that they're saying that they're capable of doing that, maybe doesn't reflect in the conversation. So it's going to be a challenge continuing to move forward, but it's already here. So.
Yes, I have a question. I think in this room there are a couple of second-year fellows and first-year fellows. And in the next 12 months or so, some of us will transition into full-time roles. And it's generally said that when you're a fellow, you kind of have a soft landing, because they may not go you at the same level of scrutiny as the rest of the employees, considering that you are learning. I just wanted to ask, what general advice do you have for us? Those of us who are transitioning, I know the level of expectation is going to increase, and the level of scrutiny. How can we manage that pressure and also try to meet up that standard of?
One thought on the level of scrutiny, maybe not on the level of scrutiny, but one thing that you will have to manage is, I think the fellows get a lot of support, right? There's regular interactions with the leadership, but once you become a full-time employee here or anywhere, that's going to kind of dissipate, and you'll be an employee, but you have the advantage of people already know you, they know kind of your capabilities, but you're not going to have that, I think, regular day-to-day touch base with people maybe that you had, certainly not to the same degree. So you will need to find your own drive and self-advocate a bit more, like, hey, I have a question, hey, I don't understand blank, how can I do this? But also, how can I help with blank? Because people aren't going to maybe be managing your time quite as much as they were previously.
I think it's probably, we're sticking very close goes is when you're in a fellowship or a structure, you kind of have, okay, we're gonna do this for 4 months and then here 6 months or this 2 months, and it's sort of there. And you're kind of reacting to that versus when you're an internal employee, it's more, you have to become more proactive yourself in your learning journey, in your development journey versus its structured, right? So there is each company does have structures around, learning portfolios and things like that where you can do, but even those are self-driven. So, you have to go to your manager or you have to identify, this is a skill set I'd really like to improve on, and here's what I would like to do to improve that, take this course or do this or do this. So really it's that switch from sort of reactive of other people suggesting, oh, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? To you have to own that and be proactive in asking yourself, where is it that I want to go? And not just waiting for somebody to tell you, but actually saying, yes, let me look at what trainings are there or what opportunities are there.
I would encourage you to keep track of your successes. For my first year in this job, I kept a snap cup for things that I was proud of, that I was able to do, that I improved on, that I did something different. It was super helpful then when it came time for my annual review, because I think sometimes we all get in the thick of doing X, Y, or Z, and we don't think through, like, hey, I actually forgot that I did this one thing, and it had a huge impact, but it was 11 months ago, and I completely forgot about it because 900 other fires have come up since then. So keeping track of where you are when you start your job, and then what you've done to improve, and how you feel about your self-improvement. Offer yourself some grace. You're not gonna be perfect. Nobody's perfect. So where were you yesterday? Is it better than you were last week? Is it, where are you at on your trajectory towards whatever your goal happens to be? So thinking through that and keeping that in the forefront of your mind, because it's real easy to remember all your failures. It's real hard to remember your successes.
Yeah, I would just add one last bit by saying that some of it is a little bit by design too, right? Like, you're gonna continue to ramp your responsibilities and your skills and all these different things. And so as you continue to grow and take accountability for those things, regardless of what the outcomes are, part of that is going to be, it sounds rudimentary, but we utilize some of these tools that are put in front of us, like SMART goals and things like that, that are an easy way for you to measure sort of what your growth looks like on a scale from when I first started my fellowship to where I'm at as my first time employee. And so you sometimes have to go back and evaluate some of those things, like she said, right? Like, look at all the things that you did successfully. Look at how much you've accomplished since the day that you started. Because it might feel like you haven't gone as far as you have, but you probably wouldn't have been pulled into a full-time role, with either the company that you're with or with another group or something like that if you weren't doing something right. So just continue to build your mindset that you can continue to succeed. It's really just up to your ambition.
I have a last question. So I know that most of you have management roles, and potentially some of you are maybe recruiters in your respective companies. What are some of the criteria or characteristics they are looking for a fellow new graduate as opposed to someone who has been in the industry? What are some of the reasons why you give a chance to someone who is just a current recent graduate as opposed to someone who has had a level of experience?
Richard, you said a lot when it was really just making sure that you show up and you want to learn. And that can come through on an interview, that can come through on a resume, that can come through on a letter of intent. Like, hey, I've got this interest and this curiosity and this drive within me as an individual. And then, Leo, I think you shared a little bit too about like making sure you're not overinflating your resume. Like, you can back up what's on paper. And I think that those are all characteristics that can help you be successful as you apply for a new job. And sometimes the only thing, I guess, to the point of like AI, a lot of companies will start to use that to get through like resumes and letters of intent and like scanning those things. Or is it ZipRecruiter that you fill in all that information and it kind of like puts it together in a massive formula for you? Make sure that the words that you have in those blanks and the words that you have on your paper, they are clear, they are concise, they are factual. You're not saying something with 100 words that you could have said with 10 words. Choose them wisely and recognize that is going to be what gets your foot in the door, and that's what's going to be on somebody's desk to review right away.
I was gonna say, if I understood the question, it was really, looking at somebody coming out of their fellowship versus somebody that may have 5-10 years of experience. I'm not sure I would go in with any, preconception of one versus the other anyway, so I would, treat them equally, but I guess maybe a couple of the things I would think have in the back of my mind is who's able to bring in maybe even fresher ideas and something new to the role, and maybe that's where a fellow or somebody that is newer in the workforce may be able to do that versus somebody that's more experienced. Or I would tease out some of those aspects, right? And not always all of those. Sometimes it's people that have worked at 2-3 places before that can do that. So those are some of the aspects I would say to tease out to say, okay, if you look at it, regardless of whether they've had fellowship experience or no fellowship experience and 5 years of work experience, really, what are they able to bring to the role? And fellowship, I guess, to me, I would really understand that fellowship. It's an intense period, right? 2 years, and what did that person really gain in those 2 years? That is it a well-roundedness that they would be able to bring because they were able to go through all of these different areas and really bring that to the table, whereas one person working 5 years in a same role is not able to bring that. I don't know, right? So those would be the types of considerations I would start getting into if I had, 2 people, one doing a fellowship and one really just working, real world experience without a fellowship.
I don't have much to add, so.
Alright, I have a question. So just based on all of your responses today, and correct me if I'm wrong, are you more so look at when you on new hires more as what the team needs right now, or just what this person can offer in 5 years? Really, like that. That question.
Can I repeat it back so that I understand? So are you filling a position or are you looking at the candidates to see what they could bring to elevate the team?
Yeah, because it sounds like, say, if your team needs your fresher perspective, then you're going to go for someone who you feel can probably offer that, rather than someone who has all this experience, this and that. But if your team just needs someone who's like a team player and can do the role that's on, a work day, then is that going to be more so what you're looking for?
I think I understand.
Before we get started into that question, Leo did share with me that he has a meeting directly after this, and so I'm gonna allow you to excuse yourself.
Oh, what time?
It's 10:10 now.
Oh, I apologize. Sometimes I prioritize, but FDA comes at me with something and changes my list of priorities, so apologies that I have to leave. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I can start. I think it's both. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. It has to be a match of what the organization needs, I guess, or what the team needs, and what the person can bring to it. So I really would say it's never looked at in silo in one perspective only, that we're only going to bring in because I think, candidates surprise you in positive ways and negative ways. So I think, if you go in with say, this is all we need, and we're only going to kind of recruit for this team member, you kind of miss out on the opportunity, because you can find somebody that really would say, I could see them, maybe not hitting a full mark there, but they would be able to do X, Y, and Z, which would even, be amazing. And I didn't even think we'd be able to accomplish that with this new hire. So I think you have to look at both. And it starts first with defining what you need. So, the way it typically happens in organizations, you have a headcount, but then it's not just you go hire because you have a headcount. You have to define the scope of that role, right? Like what is it within the scope of that role? Is it a strategic role? Is it a tactical role? Is it an operational role? And really define that so you understand, what would bring the most value to your organization when you have a position to fill. And that, as leaders, I think that's what we have to do, is to take a holistic view and say, yeah, I have a lot of strategic people, but no operational people. And I need somebody that can book flights and that can do this, but, not thinking big picture all the time. Or vice versa. So really, it starts there with okay, what would complement and the team the most, and what would bring the biggest impact to our team as a whole. And then you start doing the recruiting for it. But I think candidates always surprise me, and you really get a better appreciation when you talk to people. And sometimes that candidates can blow you away to say, yeah, this isn't the classic fit, but I think this person will really excel in the role and bring the team together in a way that we hadn't even anticipated.
How are we on time? You want us to wrap up?
We can finish out if you want. We do have a break until 10:25, which is when the next panel session will start. It is 10:12 now, so we're free to finish up.
I don't have much to add. The only thing that I would, when you asked your question, I was really thinking about what my job is as a leader is to not just fill the position that's got X, Y, or Z responsibilities, right? But also I should be thinking about what else do I want from my team? Where else are we gonna grow? Where else are we going to expand? And so I think about my accreditation team. We are US-based accreditation. We also have a little bit of European, but tons of other global regions, right? So if I'm looking to fill some role, yeah, I need that person to be able to manage the US accreditation requirements. But also if somebody comes to the table and they're like, I have some experience in European, or I have some experience in Asian accreditation, cool, great. I have on my vision board that we're gonna expand. Now this person is gonna be able to fill this need, but also maybe can help me execute on this. So there's a little bit of, yeah, this is what I need today in this role, but also as a leader, what am I looking to do in the future? And can this person help contribute to that? Maybe, maybe not. If they can't, awesome. They can do this job that I need today, and that is my current today problem. If they can, also, what can I do and how does that fit? And I think a lot of that plays into it's kind of both, which is not helpful as a concrete answer, right?
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think there are certain roles that they're gonna be more experience requirement heavy, right? So you're gonna have to look and if it's a very strategy focused, something like that, where you're gonna put somebody in a position where they're going to be leading the direction of a project or a product or where the company is going to be in the next 3 years or something like that, then absolutely, there's gonna be a more significant impact to what that team looks like over the course of that project. And so you have to have somebody step in with the experience required to fulfill that. But if it's something more where there's a more creative aspect or something that's a little bit more generic in terms of the overall scope of the work that's going to be done, then yeah, maybe bringing somebody on who's just willing to be trained and willing to kind of jump into these big messy situations and get involved and stuff like that. Somebody with ambition and drive is more important in those aspects. And so I think but pretty much they summed it up perfectly. So I can't really add to that.
Thank you, guys.